Hello, welcome to the Housing Sector Podcast. Today I am rejoined by Mel Little. Mel, thank you very much indeed for coming back on. The last time we were together, we were talking about Birmingham City Council, how you discovered fire issues in your own block of flats and how you had been in and out of contact. And that was followed by a blog that you wrote and that I wrote. So that's had some coverage. And I will put all links to that in the comments field for this video. Mel, what have you been up to since?
So last time I was very focused on my particular building because as I stated in the last one, I work within the sector. What I did was I started to look at the various pieces of information and data and Freedom of Information Acts and widen the scope, because what I wanted to do was see whether or not it was systemic. So now, looking at what I've found, it's clear that the building isn't the story, the system is.
Yep. Yeah,
So
that's
the
what I think
system,
we all find is, it's
yeah.
we uncover with our own. It's exactly my journey. And excuse me, I've got a cat here. It's exactly my journey with green screens. You think, there you go. Look, you think it can only just be one. It must just be this isolated thing. But then it turns out, of course, that it's not. It is the whole system, isn't it?
It is. So what we've got is we've got an overstretched system, and this is creating blind spots. People are not failing intentionally, they're overwhelmed. So you've got a system that was brought in and doesn't have sufficient resource for the enforcement section. You've got overwhelmed council, local authorities, and housing associations who are reliant upon their contractor data. You've got contractors who are rushing around and aren't necessarily giving the correct information. So you're looking at a situation that where the system is completely overwhelmed. When you're looking, we're prioritizing documentation over risk. So we're ticking our boxes, and provided our boxes are ticked, we're feeling comfortable. But when you actually delve into the data, it's garbage. So the saying's garbage in, garbage out, and that's what you're getting. It's data that doesn't match the actual systemic risk within our buildings.
So when you say getting a bad echo there. When you say contractor data, what do you
Mhm.
mean by that?
So they'll be reliant upon certification, and contractors are the ones who are actually on the ground. They have no skin in the game.
So
They
I
don't carry
have
the
a
risk.
feeling about this. I've often thought that, they have no idea, particularly my own landlord has no idea. And this was proven and this isn't isolated to my landlord. Every time there's a successive merger, they take on a load of stock and they have no idea of the stock condition. And then it falls into their own portfolio. So then suddenly 50% of their stock is almost a complete unknown to them. And
Yeah,
then they uncover the problems further down the line, and at which point they're sort of drowning and being downgraded and housing ombudsman complaints. So they never get out of that pit they've dug
cycle.
themselves
Yeah,
into. Yeah.
that's partially. I mean, it's the regulation reality is that there's a new regime and it's under resourced. So there's under resourced enforcement. It's reactive, it's not proactive. And the expectations are not matching the capacity anywhere in the system. So part of it is they bring on board new stock. They don't look at the new stock. So let's take a role. There's a role that's recently been advertised by Birmingham City Council, and it's an assistant asset director role, and it's paying between 80 and 120k, and they're giving it a budget of 25 million. So on the one hand, you think 25 million's a lot. No, it isn't. They've got 59,000 properties. That's not enough. And then also look at the age of the properties. So in the majority of their high risk buildings are built in the 60s. They're aging stock, which have a very different risk profile to newly built.
Go on. So are we judging them differently?
You have to. So when you're looking at, so if you've got aging stock, it's got new stock is built to code, it's built to our new code. It doesn't have the same needs for maintenance as an old building. And you also have all of the documentation regarding the maintenance and things that you've done to that building. When you're inheriting or when you've got a building that's from the 60s, the issue you've got with that is there's no way you're going to be able to manage all of that data. You're not going to have it. So you're not going to have all the maintenance data. And then you take the fact that, say, back to fire risk assessments, the lowest level fire risk assessment you can do is a level 1. And that involves, it's the lowest level. So it's the lowest level of qualification. The individual goes into the building and ticks some boxes. That's it.
Okay, so I
They
would.
should be doing a level 3 where they're going into individual flats. They're doing a percentage of the flats and they're looking to check the condition of those flats to see if there's any breaching compartmentation between them.
So that's very much fire safe, because I know people would push back on the fact that new builds are built to a better spec and therefore don't have as much risk involved. But I know a lot of people would push back on that and say the sort of rush to build the 1.5 million and the downgrading of certain building legislation has meant that a lot of our new builds aren't as good as we think they are. And that's becoming more apparent with the faults that we're unearthing, which is my concern we have for sort of the future, the next sort of 6 months to 18 months, is all these issues we're going to find. So look, Birmingham City Council, they're obviously under tight resources. And what does he say? 25 million? Sorry, what was that figure?
The budget was 25 million. So
25
they were
million.
giving, for 59,000 properties, 186 of which are high-rise buildings, 23 of which are medium rise.
So what are we getting for this 25 million?
That 25 million, you're not getting a fat lot. Let's put it this way: to replace a automated front door for my block was 50 grand.
Right.
So you're not getting a fat lot. A fire door's it's anything between, depending on the size of the door, anything between 300 to up to about 1,200, depending on whether they've got to do the side panels, etc. It depends greatly on what they're replacing. But you're not getting a fat lot. And when you look at the levels of disrepair you've got in their stock. So one of the things I've also done since we last spoke was DHLUC were inviting papers on disrepair. So I wrote a piece, I wrote them a paper based around the findings from my area of the world. So I put that together and that's now been published. What they're looking at very much, it looks like, when you look at, and my next case study is going to be around that. So it's what they're actually looking at. So they're looking at disrepair within the system and how that ties into safety. Because it isn't just our Webb's Law. Damp and mold's a big problem, but the system as a whole within the management of the maintenance programs is failing.
Okay, so let's slow this down and bring it back a bit, and let me play devil's advocate once again. If this is Birmingham City Council and they've managed to generate somewhere, I'm assuming from government and probably from some external funding, 25 million, what chance does that give to, the housing associations, the 10 top housing associations? Where are they going to find this money? And if that money isn't even scratching the surface, how big is the debt that these housing associations know they're inevitably crashing towards?
Well, one of the things that we've both been talking about recently is looking at service charges. Service charges are ring fenced. By that, I don't mean they're ring fenced for your building. I mean they're ring fenced for housing for that landlord. So you can use them to pay. You can legitimately and legally use them to pay for any wages. You can use them to do your improvement programs, and that's what's happening. So again, when you're looking at the fact that my particular building, they've been charging us for something that doesn't exist and hasn't existed for a number of years. And when that was raised, they said, well, it's a fixed charge. So I went away and read up on it. And what that actually means is they're supposed to every year at the end of March, they review what it actually costs them for that service and revise the charges accordingly. So if for that building, you didn't have, say, a warden or a concierge or whatever the landlord's calling it, they're supposed to remove it or revise it down, but they don't. They always revise it up. And then that forms part of their pot. So that's what they're using that money for. So I've got a test case going through at the moment, looking at whether or not the judiciary agree that it's not something that can be used for that. Because one of the arguments you get, even when you speak to your local MP or your local councillor, is that it's ring fenced, because that's what they believe, and it is for housing, but not for your block.
Yeah, so we've got a case of ourselves. We've asked them for the figures, and which we're legally entitled to within 31 days, and they haven't responded. And the only assumption I can come up with is that they don't have them. They can't back
No,
them up.
no. So what we're looking at is when assumptions replace evidence, residents are getting charged for services that never happened. And their argument will be, and I can tell you how it will work. And again, I don't believe it's necessarily malevolent. I think it's a case of, well, you've got low staffing levels because everybody's under pressure. So you've got a lot of people going off sick with stress or sick with various other things. They think, well, we're going to get one of those in, and it will be full time. So we'll just keep that in the pot for now, for when we get it sorted, and that turns into years. So in our case, we're looking at it being charged for a full time provision, and it dropped down to 2 or 3 hours 3 years ago. Then it dropped down to 1 hour at the beginning of this year. And now it's somebody will turn up when they turn up, if they turn up for a non-specified period of time on a non-specified day, which means effectively it doesn't happen. And that same as with the cleaning, they can't keep cleaners. So they're keeping that money in the pot because the aim is they will have cleaners, but legally they're supposed to look at what they spent and review it down or review it up.
So we have a constant. One of the things we picked out of when they recalculated we underestimated by this amount. You've now got to pay an extra £250 a month per flat. And one of those charges that stuck with me were, and I think you've got a very valid point about the people that come round to the property and the concierge services. That's without doubt valid. But of course, the hidden cost here is the heads in the office, and we've got
Yeah.
a team of people who they just, well, we need someone else. They just grow and grow and grow, and all you've got is people forwarding on the same spreadsheets with their own little tweak to it. And Mavis can't cope, so we'll get her an assistant, and then we're allowed to charge an extra 15% a year, so we'll just whack on another 15% there. But they're not result driven, are they?
No. And I think that's one of the areas that we need to look at. So going back to regulation, I know that there's a big recruitment drive at the moment with the building safety regulator. I think there was one also with the Ombudsman fairly recently, because us as in tenants are learning where you go.
Yeah.
So they're starting to see the scale of the problem. Now, we've all known the scale of the problem for a long time because we live in it. But the Ombudsman and the regulators are starting to get a grip. My only concern is that I think that landlords such as, say, mine, Birmingham City Council, they're too big to fail. So where does the housing stock go?
This was and this is the second part, 7th of December, second podcast I recorded today. And this is something I kind of touched on with Ibs there is, I think there's a lack of no one wants to admit how big the problem is, and the fact that if one of them fails, it's going to be a domino effect.
Well, there are certain things. So when we last spoke, I was of the opinion that we were under a Section 114 and we were bankrupt. When you dig into the data, we never were.
This is Birmingham City Council.
Yeah.
Because I did that blog post on Birmingham's gone broke or something. I think that was the title. I put the link in. But then they're not broke.
It was. No.
So why aren't they broke now? Have they just found it under the mattress?
They never were. And what that tells me is that they can't even manage their finances. So the reason why the Section 114 came into place and they have commissioners in place is based around.
Just explain a Section 1. What was it?
It's at 114, which is effectively bankruptcy. So there are a couple of reasons why they might bring commissioners in. So DHLUC ultimately are in charge of, and they will put in place commissioners if they see that a local authority is failing. So housing associations get downgraded, and the regulator of social housing has the power to take the housing off them if they see that there's a giant risk. It's slightly different for local authorities because local authorities are ultimately owned by central government. So they'll put in place commissioners first. We've had commissioners in place for quite a while. And the commissioners were put in because the regulator for social housing, when they were, this was 2023, I think it was, they put them in place because they found that there were serious issues around their financial governance. And part of that is they don't know where their money is. So you've got the things that they've done. So you've got the not identifying that other areas of the business might have an issue with equal pay, for example. You've got that, which again tells me that they have a real problem managing their risk. Because what is the very first thing you do once you get stung with something? You check that it's not anywhere else, whereas they didn't. We've got the bin strike, which is now coming up to 12 months. It's 9 months, isn't it? 9, 10 months.
Something us down we hear about, yeah, and it looks horrendous.
We've got the fact that even the agency drivers are going out on strike with them now. Because Birmingham City Council have really badly handled the negotiations. My concern is, and when you're putting in place that role, that assistant director role with a £25 million budget with impossible scope, you can't manage even the 186 HRBs on vibes and spreadsheet optimism. And that seems to be how they think they can manage their, well, everything. They have a big governance issue. And that's a concern. And I think other local authorities are feeling the pressure and under the same strain and the same constraints and have the same issues because nobody really understands the scope.
Yeah, I don't think anyone wants to admit to it.
No. And until we see some form of regulation, until the building safety regulator stops the initial phase, which is what they're still in at the moment, which is hand-holding and training and advising, we're all stuck waiting for something to happen.
I had do you know what? We'll put it in here. It's an MP criticising. Let's put a clip in here.
Fiona, Jonathan, I've had incredible amounts of waffle this morning. I don't think you're answering people's questions particularly well. And I'm just really struggling with actually what you do. So you give no deadlines when people are in this C4 and you've alluded to, you just review action plans. There's 300 people that work for your organisation. You don't do inspections. You give 6 weeks notice. It seems like you review a lot of paperwork and you haven't got to the point of how you actually are improving standards for our constituents across the country. You're not giving me any confidence that you hold social landlords and councils to account to improve standards, to improve the day-to-day lives of our constituents. It sounds like you just review lots of paperwork in the background.
So there we go. There is a review, an MP calling out the regulator of social housing, saying, it's whimsical almost. They're just ticking boxes and holding hands in training. So when do we give them the bite? And if we give them the bite, are they going to suddenly turn around and go, well, 50% of the UK's housing population are in unsafe homes. We need to move them out. We need to decant them. We need to knock down buildings. And is that the reason that the regulator doesn't have any bite? Is it's just too scary to really look any deeper in?
Well, I think that particularly when you've got aging high-risk buildings, you're looking at them having a very real risk. So you've got nominal fire doors, you've got compartmentation, you've got works that they don't know what's happened, so they cannot tell you where the voids are, which is where the risk is. And the calls and contact I've had with the building safety regulator, I sent over, and when you look at the data that I sent over, so everything that I've got and everything that I publish comes from FOI data or data that's been supplied to me by Birmingham City Council. Because I don't want to unnecessarily shout at people. I want to make sure that everything that I'm coming from a place of it being 100% true based on what they're telling me. When you look at that data, it's clearly systemic because it's the same contractors, it's the same templates, it's the same people managing it, it's the same budgets. So what I'm seeing here will be across the entire portfolio. But because of the capacity problem that the building safety regulator's got, I'm now doing their job. So I've got to put in raise different complaints for each of the buildings.
Right.
So they can see it's systemic. So what I'm doing is, and each of the complaints. So if it's a complaint again about the fire doors, I've got to go in and raise that. If it's a structural complaint like the giant crack that we've got in this building, I've got to raise that separately, so that there is enough volume to try and help them go to the senior leadership team and get the senior leadership team to take action. And I don't think that what I'm seeing here is only here. I think the only way that we can manage it and the only way that we can change things would be for local authorities and social housing providers to publish honest data so that we can have a look at what the real risk is. We should resource the councils properly. Transparency, the golden thread, needs to reach residents. Now, that's the one thing that's came out clear from all of the conversations I've had with the building safety regulator. They're expecting there to be some form of dashboard where you as a resident would go in, pull up your property and be able to see when the last fire door check was, what the building safety case file says, what the building safety case report says, what planned works there are in there. So that's something that it's, I think the problem we've got is that everywhere is really cut to the bone. The system currently is valuing documents over outcomes. So we're fine because we've got all of these. So one of the things I said to the building safety regulator, looking at Birmingham City Council again, is the regulator for social housing. One of the reasons, there were two reasons why they put commissioners in. One was around financial governance and the other was around risk. And the thing around risk was that they hadn't done the fire risk assessments for the medium rise, which were a lot smaller than my building. They're normally about 3 stories. They're up to 7. And the low rise, they hadn't done them. And their way of dealing with that was to just do blanket level 1s everywhere. You can't do that because how old's the building? The risk is going to be different depending on where it is. So what's the ASB level like in that block, in that area? Has it had many fires? Does it suffer from arson problems? Do you have an awful lot of vandalism there? Has it had an awful lot of maintenance work done? These are all things you should be looking at when you're deciding what level of risk assessment to do. Just doing a simple level 1 is back to my compliance theatre because you're not identifying the real risks.
Compliance theatre was another blog that we had up there. That again, I'll put a link in. Okay, so look, what's the solution?
I'm not here to blame people because I think honesty is the only path to safety, and honesty is currently the rarest commodity in this industry.
Yeah.
We need to publish real risk. There needs to be grown-up conversations where we're looking at the age of the stock and the risk profile of the stock and identifying how we do it. We need to go out and actually speak to residents. So some areas of the country and some councils and local authorities are putting in place these things now. So they're looking at it and they're thinking, we're not managing our customer engagement properly. We're not. We need to do this, this, and this. And they've started to put things in place. But then you've got the crossover between it being forming part of the customer engagement team's normal process and it actually needing to be a different process because what you're giving them is very different information. And the information needs to be packaged in a way that makes sense. I understand it purely because I do it for a living. So I can look at something and I can look at the acronyms, and I hate acronyms. I understand what they mean. I don't always.
Yeah.
So sometimes you'll say ACM to me and I will say, instantly, because I come from an occupational background, I'll think asbestos, but they're talking about aluminium because it's within fire. So they don't even make sense within the industry. So it's a case really of making it so that when I'm saying simplifying it, what I as a resident need to know is, what are the risks in my building and what are you doing to fix them?
Yeah, I created a sort of dictionary tool on the housing sector website, which went really well. Aimed kind at residents, but people in the sector are picking up on it as well. And I've got I recently reached out and said, can you update if any, and got loads of messages. So I do need to do that. And if you have any acronyms that you would like to put in there, please email them over and I will get them built in as well. And I do think we talk in riddles. The information we share is at best hidden, and you have to move around. And when you put in a subject access request, they want you to narrow the scope of it so they can avoid things, and then they avoid things anyway. The ICO's flooded with complaints. The housing
Yes.
ombudsman is an 18-month time frame as far as I can work out.
Yes, at
Regulator of
least.
social housing has no bite, and the CEOs in the housing association are just pushing out a narrative that goes, yeah, no, we're doing all right, look, we did this, yeah, we're handing over the new keys for 80 homes, and yeah, they're all collapsing. But there seems to be a lack of thought leadership. And what I thought was just my own landlord, I have now seen, and I use that as a sort of microcosm, if you like. If I focus on what they're doing wrong, I guarantee exponentially we can work that out and see what the rest of the sector is doing. After all, my CEO sits on the board of the National Housing Federation. So that proves to me that it is systemic, but it's allowed to be. And my fear is, and this is kind of what I was covering with Ibs earlier, is that we just cannot let any of them fail, and the government can't let any of them fail, because we realise what a sort of house of cards it all is.
Well, when you've got some of your larger housing providers, where does their stock go? If they fail, where's their stock going? So you can end up with an Elmo situation. So some of the local authorities, and that's at arm's length. So the regulator of social housing might decide that they will temporarily remove the housing stock from a local authority while they get themselves in order, and that they'll then form an Elmo. So it'll still be part of the council.
Sorry, what's an Elmo?
Elmo's better though. At
Sorry.
large, it's an at arm's length organisation,
Okay.
management organisation. So you have there are various local authorities where they're still sitting. So it's historic. So they've taken the housing off them for a while, or the local authority might decide that they don't want to directly manage the housing. They'd like to focus on this, so they'll build or in. One of these as a company, which still reports into the council. So it's not independent by any means, but it manages the day-to-day risk. So that's one way that they do it. The other way is that they just take the housing stock off them and distribute it to housing associations. And in your larger local authorities, again, that's not, where do they go? And when a housing association gets to, I think the sweet spot for volume of properties is about 30 to 35,000.
Okay.
After that, it becomes a little bit too large to manage. Below that, it's vulnerable to take over.
So these successive mergers that we've had that have pushed the portfolio over the 50,000 in many cases, that's then too hard for them to manage?
It is, with the levels of staff they tend to keep. And the thing that we need to keep in mind, and it's very difficult too when you're living in properties that don't feel safe or you don't feel in a good state of repair, is they're not making profit. They're not a profit making industry. So when they're doing it, they'll staff right down to the bare bones. They'll spend the least they can on in everything in order to plow money back in. So we sit there and we pay our rent, and we're like, how I'm paying all of this. The rents are capped as well, and the capped rents mean that they're having to do things like borrow service charge money to pay for refurb programs, which I don't know is happening, but that's what I think is happening. I think they're moving that service charge money around within the housing pot to pay for your upgrades and to pay for the other bits and pieces. And when you look at, say, the risk we've got currently with the once the building safety regulator actually get going, and they will. At the moment, they are just making sure that everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing and tiptoeing. The first one is going to cause a huge political fallout. So I think it'll probably be one of the smaller councils.
I too think that the service charge money gets moved around, and I've been saying for years, you make money on new builds, you don't do any of the service that you're charging people for, because that service charge is going to dilapidate stock. When you can't fix that, you sell it off, and the circle continues, and people just get processed. So I've had that fear, but it is unfounded. It's not in any way.
Can't prove it.
All I know is prove it. Yeah, but with this lack of honesty that we get from the housing associations, you have to speculate and you have to think, well, hang on, if A equals B, then maybe it does equal, So it's a lack of honesty that leads to people like you and me questioning it and going, well, hang on a minute, there's got to be something. There's got to be an issue somewhere. It's very interesting what you're saying about not understanding the stock, because that's something I believe in. And my old mate Leon, in fact, just get him on a podcast, because he's sort of reaching out to tenants and getting a sort of a better look than the tenant satisfaction measures, and a lot of the surveys and all the stuff that they claim that they're looking into, and yet he's getting a lot of bad press for doing so. So I don't think they want to admit to the state of their stock.
I think there's a couple of ways that you can manage that. So one of the problems you see on the other side of the fence, so I'm going to put my other hat on for a little minute, is when you're trying to do any works, getting a resident to engage can be a nightmare. But I believe, as a resident, that's partially because of the way that we approach it. So, for example, if you've got a company that are in a block and they're doing the communal doors, and if they have time and they also still have stock, they have the stock of the right doors, they might do some of the front doors. That's actually a win-win. But instead of just knocking on a door, when you're putting the notes around saying, we're going to be doing your communal doors on these dates, if we've got any spare time, we might knock on and see whether or not you're available for us to do your front door. If you have a problem with that, let us know. And then take those people out of the pot, you'll get a little bit more buy-in. I think it's a case of, we're historically, as an industry, not very good at informing our customers.
Well, they don't want to. They don't want to. I mean, I have got a court affidavit where the customer service director went, "Oh no, I don't want to go around because they're too upset with me and they might shout at me." Well, it's because you don't communicate with them and you've got them in unsafe homes and they keep asking reasonable questions via your info at, and yet you'll send a fire safety officer around on a weekly basis to get yelled at by residents who are fed up.
Yeah, and that's it, again, we're looking at it at the wrong level. I think, how do we support the members of staff who are going out there weekly to get yelled at?
Yeah.
Because they will burn out, and then with them goes their knowledge, and then we're back to square one. So we have a lot of individuals leaving the sector, particularly front-facing staff, because the world has changed slightly and customer service has changed anyway following the lockdowns. I think we forgot how to communicate with people. Coupled with, if you're living in a home that you feel is unsafe, you're instantly angry.
Yeah.
You're instantly angry. You're not necessarily going to be terrible. You know, in your head, it's not that person's fault, but they are a representative of the company that you are annoyed with. So you might speak in a way that makes them feel, and then they leave. So the old model, where you had housing officers that took care of a patch and they knew the individuals who lived within that patch, worked. And it worked because they built a relationship. They understood that, that person doesn't do very well in the winter. So what we'll do is we manage speaking to them like this, because they're really, they're grumpy. They don't do very well in the winter. Or they've got them diagnosed with schizophrenia, and when they're having a med change, they can flare up a little bit. So we just need to, manage that relationship that way. They knew how to manage the relationships. Because we've become more remote, more phone based, and it's going into a central part, you've lost that continuity of care. And that is what we're seeing and that's just then escalating the situation, because people are getting angrier. And then anybody who might actually know these people is leaving because they're tired of being shouted at.
Do you know, this comes back to a conversation I had on an earlier podcast. Does size really matter? And it was, I've forgotten her name now. She was great. it was a smaller housing association in Scotland, and they had exactly that. They knew someone was at risk, and they were able to get some food vouchers out. And I've sung the praises of the housing officer, which we don't have, we don't see, and that local, and when housing associations themselves were embedded within the communities that they serve, but we've lost that through successive mergers, and that sweet
Yeah,
spot of 30-35K has been blown, hasn't it? So
it
yeah,
has.
yeah.
And I mean, do I think that there's a way of larger housing providers managing it? Yeah, but it's gonna mean that they're gonna have to hire more staff. They're gonna have to look at what their model works like. So are they regional? I'd regionalize. So if you regionalize and you have people taking care of a region, look at how many people they can legitimately manage. Where's the stock? So some of the national housing providers, for example, you can't live in Birmingham and manage the stock in Southampton
No. Is it literally what we've got?
because that doesn't work. You don't know those people. You can't build a relationship, and you need to build a relationship because you need them to be honest with you. You need them to be happy to come for you to come into their home, and it is their home to do work. So they need to understand why you're doing it in a way that doesn't scare people, because that's the other thing. So if I'm saying that I'm, stock condition surveys or an intrusive fire risk assessment, people will automatically think that means they're at risk, and it doesn't. What it means is that we will understand whether or not you're at risk and what we can do to stop it. At the moment, we're not telling people why we want to do things, so people don't understand why we want to do it, and then they won't engage.
And they're tired of engaging with surveys that don't go anywhere or don't fix the immediate issue
Yes.
they've got, which is their unsafe home.
And again, sometimes they just need to know why you need to do something. So not every time that you're going out to do things will it fix what they think is the main problem, because it may be a case of when you get that data back, you look at it and actually something else is a bigger problem. So that needs to be resolved first, because certain amount of funds, certain amount of resources, certain amount of available people. So you will prioritize it on risk. But again, that's back to what the Building Safety Regulator foresaw when they brought in the Building Safety Act was closer ties with the resident. The point to it was that it gave the resident power. So you have the ability to pull all of this data through and go, hang about, why haven't you done this? I'm not comfortable with that. It was supposed to make you feel safer. But in the case of Birmingham City Council, I had to fight to get the data, because initially they told me A didn't apply because I wasn't a HRB. Then when I showed them that I was a HRB, it didn't apply because they weren't yet certificated. So I couldn't have it until they were. When I pointed out that I was legally entitled to it from day one, so I'd have it now, thank you. They told me I'd asked for the wrong stuff. I said, no, I asked for it by its actual name because I work in the industry. But your job as a building safety manager is to interpret what I meant and send me it. So can I have it, please? And it was only by my refusing to meet with them, unless I had all of this data, that I got it. And that's what started me. And now I'm going to ask for a Freedom of Information Act request regarding this data, because that looks interesting to me. So I want to deep dive on that. And what it's showing me is there's a systemic issue, and there's going to be if you're using the same templates and people and contractors and funds.
See, it comes back to it's the performance again, isn't it? It's all about, and we pay these communication teams, and their job is to sort of spin the truth. And the lengths that Green Square Accord have gone to silence me, and you think, well, hang on a minute, I'm raising issues that are valid and I'm doing it in a constructive way. And when you've ignored me and pushed back, I've escalated to put it online, and then they've accused me falsely of harassment, of harassing junior female members of the staff, abusing, calling people on their mobile phone numbers. None of it's true, all to try and smear me and silence me, which they did until I kept on going. They've got me removed from events, and you think, but I'm the sort of person that you actually should be engaging with, because I'm giving you a feedback from the ground level. And you're doing the same thing, as are all the other reluctant heroes that we've had on this podcast. And yet the system is going to such lengths to silence us. you have to ask, how transparent and honest do they want to be, and why aren't they?
Well, it's definitely it's supposed to be a more transparent system, but I know that certainly within this local authority, it's more opaque. So the other thing you've got, and the way that they set themselves up, so the way that their structure is makes it difficult for you to follow anything through. Left hand doesn't know what right hand's done. Nobody knows anything. You'll go back through repeatedly to get them to speak to you. So you'll agree something very early on. For example, it was agreed very early on that I would do all of the dealing with them rather than my partner. And then you'll get a new person and they'll go, well, I can't speak to you.
Yeah, I've had that. We have that. Yeah, that's thrown at us. And now it's a communication plan that isn't a communication plan. It's something else. You think, but it's exactly the same. You just change the word. You change the noun.
Yeah, I think part of it is they don't know how to fix it. Because they don't know how to fix it, they're just scrabbling. And everybody's waiting for the first building safety regulator case to drop. Once that drops, they'll all know what they're supposed to be doing. It doesn't matter that the building safety regulators told them, or that the act is actually quite clear. They're waiting to see what the first prosecution or the first action, what that actually relates to, and then that's what they'll focus on. But that's partially, I genuinely don't think it's malicious. I think it's a resourcing issue. I think it's a case of they haven't got the funds and they haven't got the people. So if they focus on the bits that they know are going to get them into trouble.
Yeah, but they keep focusing on oh, she can't keep up, so we'll give her an assistant, and then that assistant needs an assistant, and they grow out the middle. And they say, as they've been there year after year after year, you've just got this, this lump in the middle of people who aren't performing, who haven't had to perform, who, well, this is what I do. Well, what does Dave do? Well, Dave does this. We don't really know. And it's the same with the service charge issue, isn't it? Well, we've always charged for that. So hang on a minute. If we stop charging for it now, because it's not, it's a lift that doesn't exist, or it's a concierge service, we've then got to refund it because we shouldn't have been charging for it. So they're buggered if they do and buggered if they don't, as my nan would say.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. As I said, I'm waiting. Once I'll be able to say more with regarding the court once it's finished going through. But the point of that was I wanted to use it as a test case because I know that legally you are supposed to do certain things. One of the things that they did was they sent us an email where they admitted and offered a very small, didn't touch the sides.
Now, look, Mel, I get lots of whistleblowers, for want of a better word. I get lots of whistleblowers, who call me up, who message me, who speak to me off the record. And I can't share that. I only use it as background to go on, and I appreciate that, and I understand the situation they're in. And I hope I'm not crossing a line here with you, but you've come out and you are part of the sector, and you've come out as a bit of a whistleblower with Birmingham City Council and others. How has that affected your career?
To be honest, it didn't, because I was working within occupational, so there wasn't a crossover, and I cleared it. I'm very careful with what I publish, so I've had a lot of information, a lot of whistleblowers come forward from both the fire service and Birmingham City Council with information that I can't use. I can't use until I've actually got some of the Freedom of Information Act stuff back. Whenever I publish anything, I will only publish things that have come from Freedom of Information Act legislation. I'm very, very careful. I have changed role. I'll see whether or not it impacts on that. But one of the things that they did before they hired me was read everything that I've done.
Yeah, I always say that before people, when I get people come to me, we got a bit of tech we want to promote, and I go, okay, have a look at who I am, what I've done. It's all out there in the open. And if you're happy to align your brand with me, then so be it. If you're not, I respectfully understand. And a lot of them do fall silent, which is a shame, but they have to play the game, and that comes back
Yeah.
to we have to play the CIH, the Housing Federation. We have to appease these people because it's run by this top lot of people who aren't particularly thought leaders, who are just dampening down fires and issues rather than going, we've got a problem here, we've got a funding gap.
Which, as I've said to you before, is one of the that works fine, and it is rare. All of the things that we're looking at are rare, but it doesn't mean that they don't happen. And when they do happen, the sector is in trouble because they knew that they should be doing these things. It's much sunlight purifies. It's much better to get everything out into the open. Stop treating your customers like they're stupid, because they're not. You may have to lose the acronyms, but that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Explain to them, because one of the things, when the director of assets came on the walk round with me in August, he kept saying to me about ALARP. Again, I think because he didn't think I'd know what it meant. And I was saying, how can you tell me something is ALARP, which is as low as reasonably practicable, when you don't know when the extension on my block was built? That tells me you have no idea about this building, so you can't tell me something's ALARP because you don't know. And he also kept saying that one of the things that the feedback and pushback that I got from the building safety regulator was that this building is low risk. And it is. The point I've been making to them all along, though, is the others aren't. Income and House in particular is one that's very large. It's in a very deprived area of Birmingham. High levels of ASB, high levels of drug use. That building is a risk.
Yeah.
And they're using the same processes, the same people, the same templates to manage that. So it'll be a level 1 fire risk assessment, which won't look at where the gaps are. It won't look at how fire is likely to spread in that block. So I'm not expecting them to have done all of the work on my block straight away. What I was actually asking them for was a program of works.
Yeah. If we have faith in the process and it's taking the necessary steps.
Yeah, exactly. So just explain what the process is and why.
And
you will get some people who shout, but in the main, people will understand it.
Yeah, exactly. I wrote another blog. We keep plugging blogs that I've written and you've written and that we shared. The truth is out there, here, there, and everywhere. And it was the same thing. Hug these critics. Listen to them. If you genuinely want to fix the issues, listen to these guys. Stop villainizing them. But they don't. They've got their token tenants. They've got their customer panels. They've got their fellow people within the sector that they converse with. And it's this echo chamber. It's just this circle. Mel, we've gone on, and I think we could have gone on for another hour quite easily, but I'm aware it's a Sunday morning. Thank you very much indeed for giving up your Sunday morning to speak to me today, and let's get you back in the new year.
Great, thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Mel, and dare I suggest, have a great Christmas. No, I will speak to you before Christmas, Mel.
Speak to you soon, Ben.
Thanks, Mel. Oh, and let me put out another message there. If you are a whistleblower or want to be a whistleblower and you think providing some information to either myself or Mel, then please do so. You can contact me at ben@housingsector.co.uk. You can message me on LinkedIn, as many do, and we will have a phone call. And I promise you this, as Mel has also verified, I promise you, she promised you, it is off the record. It helps with the background. Yeah, I had a call from a guy, and he said to me, Ben, where are you getting all your information from about a blog that I posted? And I wrote, I didn't know who this person was, so I kept my powders dry, kept my cards close to my chest. I said, well, it's an opinion piece, really. And he laughed, and I thought, what's going on here? He said, your opinion is a lot closer to the truth than you think, which is reassuring, but at the same time terrifying, because I would love to be wrong about all of this. I suspect you're the same.
Yes. Some of the things that have come through from the whistleblowers is terrifying. So that started me straight down a rabbit hole of FOIs so I can try and get some information. And surprisingly enough, we're not forthcoming with the stuff that I need.
No, I found exactly the same. Okay, Mel, stay strong. Thank you very much indeed for coming on today.